I'm happy you mentioned that losing the edge to attract investors to come into the country. That is one key aspect of your job as Ghana's ambassador, or all the ambassadors that are representing Ghana in other territories. Why is it so difficult? Or is it that sometimes we think that, oh, the people out there who are representing us aren't doing much when it comes to bringing investors into the country, or when it comes to bringing businessmen into the country to explore the various areas that we have in terms of growing our economy? It becomes a problem. So what are some of the challenges that you face in your line of work? It's supposed to be a chain, right?
Precisely.
Exactly. So what are some of the challenges?
And you see, the average representative out there, when you manage to, as it were, convince somebody to come to the country, take a look, even if that is all. Or some of them do come with packages of intent and all that. So they do come. And sometimes it is the frustration of even getting somebody to sit down and examine what is it that you are up to. That becomes the problem. So you may have some people running around here for a week or more without having seen some of those people who are supposed to be very crucial to what is it that they would want to do. And sometimes also some of the stories they tell basically relate to a certain level of facilitation which you don't actually need at that point in time. So, for instance, if it will cost the person 100 cedis to do what have you, and to do the same thing, it will cost him 20 cedis in some other country.
So why not go to some other country? But we boast of a good business climate.
Yeah, we can boast of a good business climate in the sense that this is a country that has a record of being very peaceful. It's a country that has a record of being populated by individuals who are very welcoming. It's a country that has a certain kind of climate that doesn't give any investor the hump that maybe after 2 months there is going to be some uprising and that kind of thing. So we have that climatic package. But sometimes it is the operation within that climatic package that becomes difficult. And those are human, issues. And I think there ought to be a certain attempt to educate people insofar as getting somebody to put some investment in. We just have to make sure that we have the right people to relate. I mean, I know that, for instance, when we managed to get our president to come and talk to the American Governors Association,
right,
some governors did come to this country. They brought, experts. And obviously they came because from our relationship with them, from what the president said when he came, they had a feeling that, yeah, we must as well move and find out what we can do, which they did. But the aftermath, which ought to be a certain kind of information from, Ghana to either those governors or to the embassy, to the effect that, well, when these people came, this and this and this and this happened, and therefore
a report.
Yeah, so that we can use that to chase up on a few things. Sometimes there's a shortfall on that, and therefore you have a difficulty even chasing up on some of these aspects. And also, we are a country that seems to revel in a certain kind of processing that was born maybe 20 years before the British left. We still hold on to that. So you get some kind of an possibility, and you have to ask somebody in Accra to do this or to do that, Nobody is accusing anybody of not doing anything, but the time. Because if, for instance, you would want to buy this water 2 months ago, and you have to take permission here to buy it, and the permission takes 2.5 months, the price has changed.
Yeah.
But somehow we stick onto the price that you originally brought. That doesn't make, a lot of justifiable, positioning. So you may lose, that particular avenue of expanding, the support. I do accept that maybe I'm trying very hard to talk on the periphery because I'm not in the market for, as it were, holding some people responsible for certain things.
Or not doing their job.
Yeah, but basically what I'm saying is that we have to review some of our processes.
Okay.
Because you cannot fight a 21st century,
with
war
a 1947 rifle.
with 1947 bazookas, you see.
Times have changed.
Certainly so.
Let's talk about the African Continental Free Trade Area. Here we are promoting trade within ourselves, all 54 African countries. What do you make of this brilliant initiative? And if we have some of these challenges coming in, how are we going to do things different from within ourselves? How are we going to do things different? I mean, given the fact that we've laid out a few challenges out there.
Well, I believe that even the thought and the will to do it in itself is wonderful. I would want to believe that the chief executive that has been appointed is sort of clued to the task and has the strength to handle the obvious frustrations that are going to come into this because of the size of the market, the variety of the market, and whatnot. And therefore, his organization is going to have to tune itself to some of these things. But you see, frustration or not, the one thing that we have to get under our belts is that across the world, within the next 3 decades or so, Africa is just going to be the one place where anybody who wants to make some kind of economic advancement will have to come to. Now, the difficulty with our free trade thing is that even connectivity is so negligible. So that is an issue to be tackled. There is also the question of, as it were, the similarities in some of the products we would want to sell.
Yeah.
But for instance, we are into a good relationship with the Côte d'Ivoire with regard to cocoa. So we can also pick some of these major products and go into some kind of concert with the other countries that have something to do with it. But more importantly, I believe that the main politicians, the heads of state and all that, ought to have the will to make sure
the political will
that this thing works. They have to have the political will, because that kind of free trade area is going to call into question immigration regulations, trade and import regulations that are going to be very different across the continent and all that. But we should also take consolation from the fact that the European Union started with 6 countries.
Yeah.
Even though now one of them is causing difficulties in there, but at least they made it.
Yeah, they made it.
So we just have to be focused enough. We just have to be highly, intent on making sure that something works. Because I always feel that the one thing that we have on the continent is that irrespective of where anybody comes from, no one ever has an objection to being called an African. And we have to use that, because it is the one cement element that we've got. So we have to stop being a little too picky. We have to stop being whatever it is, but then focus on the fact
African
that
agenda.
if you make it, I'm making it, and we focus on that agenda.
That's very interesting. Let me ask you, you were one of the architects behind the Year of Return 2019, which saw the visit of the U.S. Speaker of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. That was big. That was very, very, it was a milestone for us as a country. How much of work went into that? And congratulations for that beautiful initiative.
Well, a good bit of the time, the diplomats' work has to do with relationships, building trust, getting people to believe in a few things that you believe in, and getting them to understand that your country is probably the best poised to do some of these things. So at least the Year of Return, because it had a significant impact on the Black American community, it was easier to deal with, the Congressional Black Caucus and some of the African American communities. The speaker, I think, came on board because she, one, for her own orientation insofar as race is concerned, for the position that she holds, and for the fact that she is sensitive to the broad issues of the American water view, came on board. And when we met before they came, it was very clear that she was just as committed to the whole program than as anybody else. And I found it very gratifying that she came. My only disappointment is that she came. This country was good enough to give her the best platform we have, speaking in Parliament. But the country never specifically asked her for anything. You get the point.
Right, that was a fine opportunity for us to have done that.
And I think we still have a certain kind of opportunity to zero in on her, because she's still
so that's part of diplomacy, personal relationships.
Well, precisely. So we are working on it. But I think, you see, for me, the whole bit about the Year of Return was not so much to put a marker down that 400 years ago, some people left our shores. I, for one, I considered it as the necessity to at least draw attention to the fact that these people left involuntarily.
Yeah. Against their will.
Yes. They ended up in a country they didn't know. They had to learn a language they had never heard. But they succeeded. And they wrote books, sonnets, and whatnot. The education they had was nothing to write home about.
And helped brought civilization
but
to the
they
United
certainly,
States.
Set up institutions and whatnot and whatnot. And even that language that they didn't know, for me, if you really want to get the American language, getting into your system, go to a black church on a Sunday and listen to the preacher. Gets it right there. And there are lots of things that can be attributed to blacks in American civilization, which the U.S. has to be very thankful for. So for us, my view was that we should acknowledge all this. But in acknowledging it, we have to draw, the current population's attention to the fact that we have always considered them brothers and sisters. The only difference is that we live on one side of the pond. So this is the time for us to build bridges across the pond. Because if we did, there is enough capital in the black population to invest, in Africa. And this is where at least my, pitch is.
Okay.
And indeed, we are still trying to get, black Americans to invest in Africa, because the whole thing is not some kind of a political gimmick. It has to have something with, economic consequences.
All right. So we still have programs, some programs that are still we are working on some programs to still put Ghana out there. After the year of return, I know there have been plans to introduce beyond the year of return.
Sure.
But for COVID, here we are. So what is the plan going forward? What is going to happen with this continuation of the beautiful concept that we started?
Well, I suppose that we have to communicate with whoever is in Accra that is behind this after the year of return, because I think there's a communication gap in there. But then, as you said, COVID came in between, the effort. And in fact, we had been planning some programs in the States that were going to relate to the office in Accra to prosecute, and then this thing did happen.
Yeah.
So, in fact, we took advantage of the COVID to try and generate funding by way of a virtual concert.
This happened in the U.S.?
Yes, to raise some money.
How much was raised?
Well, we managed to have raised, I think, $60,000. Yeah. But the thing is, we had a viewership of 250,000. So my view is that if each viewer gave us $4, we would have raised the $1 million that I was looking for.
Okay.
But we didn't raise that.
That was the target.
Yeah, that was the target. But even there, I was hoping that if the average Ghanaian in the States was prepared to donate just $10, that would have been enough money to do a whole lot of things.
So what's going to happen to the $60,000 raised?
We've already mapped out, because we had a committee that is responsible. We've already mapped out on what donations we are going to make. Okay. And it includes this organization that is trying to build isolation hospitals, in Ghana and others. And then we also leave a bit of it in the States to support Ghanaians who contract COVID and are not in a good position to, support themselves and such. So we'll be making a donation very soon.
And talking of COVID, some 30,000, we had quite a number of Ghanaians losing their lives over COVID.
Yes, I'm quite sure.
What is the latest development now?
Well,
as it is, the U.S. hospitals are overwhelmed.
They are overwhelmed, and in fact, the death rate is such that you get up in the morning and they tell you how many people died the previous day.
How are you keeping up?
And you panic. So we basically have been trying to get information with regard to who has fallen, to COVID and whatnot.
Have you been successful with that so far?
Picking that information will have to be through the various states and the organizations they have with regard to hospitalization and things like that. Now, that doesn't come easy.
Right.
And then also, we have this problem of dealing with the Ghanaian population itself, because even though the passport says that when you travel...
Yeah, the first thing is to report yourself to your embassy.
Ghanaians don't. And therefore, when there is an emergency, trying to, get something done specifically for Ghanaians is always a difficult chore.
Are we going to sail through, though? Because you are the head of Ghanaians in the United States, so we hope that you will take a keen interest in getting in making sure that Ghanaians are okay.
Oh, we have been doing that. In fact, since I've been in the States, I think I have visited more Ghanaian communities than anybody before me, and the idea is to get them to understand that even though the embassy is not anybody's nanny. The ambassador and the embassy are open to them.
Yeah, it's for their own
their first line of defense. We are their last line of defense, and therefore they should utilize the embassy.
The embassies.
Sure.
All right. Now let's wrap up. You are writing a book on diplomacy. I like to talk about it before it comes out, because I will be amongst the very first people to review the book right here on my show.
Okay. And then you review and you buy one.
I definitely
will. And
you
buy a few for your friends.
I will do that.
Okay.
What is it about?
No, I think after almost 12 years in Ghanaian diplomatic service, and I suspect that I'm probably one of the longest serving diplomats, for the country. There ought to be a few things that I have picked up that we can share. So for me, I'm going to concentrate on the areas where I believe we ought to make significant changes and amendments to make it possible for the various Ghanaian embassies and ambassadors to deliver more. Because we have quite a number of, restrictions and quite a number of processing, kinks, which don't serve us very well.
Okay.
And sometimes the ambassadors don't have the flexibility and the liberty to take the kind of decisions that need to be taken within a shorter period of time. And I believe that sometimes, especially with the ambassadors who are prepared to be, as it were, either extraordinary or very agile and whatnot, these things don't help. And also with some of the countries, decisions ought to be taken, very quickly. For instance, a Japanese, parliamentarian told me that if Japan does something for you, it is no reason to do it for me because they've done it for you. It depends on who is asking, what the person is asking, when the person is asking it, and how the person is asking it.
So different approaches.
Precisely.
It is not the same as the US and then Japan.
Exactly.
Do you think diplomacy has evolved over the years?
Well, it has evolved over the years because originally a diplomat was called an emissary. You were sent to some court
deliver
or something.
Information and all
you
that.
Deliver the information. If the recipient of the information doesn't like it,
you go without your head.
You probably would go without your head. But it has evolved into a certain level of discussion, a certain level of meeting of minds and whatnot. But somehow, in the current state of the world, I tend to think that the old, philosophy of protecting my country's interest is getting back into it. And therefore, people are actually not negotiating, but perfecting the art of wordsmithery. They will create all kinds of phrases to avoid doing, certain kinds of things. And it is going to make diplomacy a bit more difficult, because of this protection of national interest that is, coming back into play. And it will make things very difficult for, as it were, little countries like us, where, because we don't have it, and that is the firepower, you don't have, much to say, because, the chief speakers say that So, but then I'm also banking on the realization that.
So it's about mastering the art for you.
Precisely. Because as for the firepower, I'm not too sure that anybody wants to employ it, because you cannot devastate, the rest of the world and call it peace. And nobody is going to take the risk of firing first or firing last. So I think we'll still totter around,
These are some of the things that are going to be captured in your book?
Yes, but I think I'm going to zero in more on how we improve, our systems and how we get more from the embassies that we have. Because it's not inexpensive to run an embassy, and therefore the expense should be reflected in the outcome that we normally bring in, because when I was in Japan, the situation was different. Japan supported us so much so that even I was amazed.
Right.
But at the moment, everybody is holding a clip on the currencies simply because of the uncertainties in the world at the moment.
What will be your final word to the young aspiring diplomats and of course some of your peers, your colleagues?
A certain commitment to the motherland is the first requirement, because there are some people who get posted to certain places and such. And you know, as I usually humorously put it, if the person came and you were interviewing the person, oh, so how was it? And oh, you know this, I bought it and so and so. This I did.
But that's very disappointing.
Yeah. And then also, you see, there is going to be a need to make everybody who works in an embassy recognize that it is a team. It is the family that all other Ghanaians in your jurisdiction, you know, subscribe to. And therefore, it is your business to make sure that people find the embassy their home. Even though I can tell you, Ghanaians tend to be sometimes so difficult that if, for instance, they tell you that if you want a visa from so-and-so embassy, you have to put in an application and don't even ask after it until after 2 weeks. With us, the person comes, wants the visa today, and if it doesn't happen, and usually it's unreasonable to expect that it happen, the next thing you knew, oh, that embassy, they are rude, they are this, which is not the case.
Right.
So I think it's a matter of making sure that most people recognize that the embassy is their home. And in fact, in that process, the embassy ought to be constantly fed with information from home, information that is relevant to the Ghanaian abroad.
This is for aspiring diplomats and your fellow diplomats as well. Well, thank you so much. A certain commitment to the motherland is key when you are put in a position to serve well. Your Excellency, it's been amazing spending some time with you on Diplomatic Affairs. We were not able to exhaust all the notes that we put together for you, but I believe that we will make time again to host you on our show so we can have, you know, all of the points, the notes we put together, exhaust them very well. We are thankful for your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
How are you spending the Christmas before you leave, though? Are you going to be here for Christmas?
Should I say that I'm one of the odd people who don't actually make a big meal of Christmas, but I'm usually, you know, very quiet at home and that kind of thing. Yeah, but I think I would want to be here for the inauguration, and therefore,
all right,
I will spend Christmas.
You know, we share the same birthday together.
Yes,
15th of December, Tuesday. Last Tuesday was our birthday. I
was going to, you know, borrow some money and buy you a Christmas present, but I haven't succeeded.
That's okay. You don't have to borrow money. All right. Thank you so much, Your Excellency.
Well,